and I'm gonna do this. Welcome to our Tuesday Pau Hana here at First Unitarian Church of Honolulu, everybody. This is a very special event, a special treat for us here at Pau Hana. We've spent a lot of time talking to sort of people outside our church and maybe in our movement, and we've had some musicians, but I feel it's time to start to get to know some of our members of our community better. And so with sort of our inaugural way of doing this, we're extremely lucky to have Al and Molly Rowland with us this evening to talk a little story with us. So hi, Al and Molly. How are you both doing today?
We're well, thank goodness.
Good. So do you want to say, how are you doing now?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. So one of the things that I've just been curious about, well, let me lay a few ground rules. It would be helpful if folks end up having questions to just privately send them to me in the chat. As much as your jokes about my jet planes were funny on Sunday, they also were distracting me during the sermon. But if you can send if you can send me any questions you have, because for clarity's sake, I'll be asking the questions tonight with Al and Molly. We're not going to open up the mics if that's okay. So if you have questions that you want answered, just put them in the chat privately to me, and I will work them in as appropriate. So this is very exciting. I'm very excited. So one of the things that I've been curious about, this first part is just pure selfishness, is to hear a little bit about what our church was like when you arrived. So I guess my question that I ask everyone in a new membership meeting that we call passive engagement is, what brought you here? So if on one of those Sundays the minister had asked, what brought you here? Can you say what brought you to the church for the first time?
I think what brought us was curiosity, and it didn't bring us to 2500 Poly Highway. The church the congregation had not bought the church at that time. They were meeting in the Hawaiian Mission Academy in Makiki, which was rented space. And we went because we just kind of thought maybe we should have a church in our lives. Neither one of us knew anything about Unitarianism. Al grew up in a congregational church, and I was a Presbyterian, but we hadn't gone to church together at all since our wedding. So we tried it out, this Unitarian group in the Hawaiian Mission Academy. There was a minister at that time. The congregation had started several years before that without a minister, started with two men in the community who were interested in discussing with other people their own beliefs about life and spirits and God and all that stuff. So we kind of came in about 3 or 4 years after they had already started. And we didn't like it.
What didn't you like?
Everybody seemed awfully self-satisfied. The minister, was kind of well, here we are, we Unitarians who are so much better than those other Baptists and other people. And the congregation sort of conveyed that. They were not particularly friendly. They said they were glad we were there, but I didn't feel any warmth. We had our first child by that time, and there was a place we could put him with a caretaker in a classroom. But it wasn't an experience that we wanted to repeat. So from then on, for another couple of years, we went to the beach on Sunday. Then we had some friends who invited us to come. They were active in the church. They had come from Seattle, where they were active in a Unitarian church, and they thought we should come too. So they invited us to participate in a march with them. And that was our first event with the congregation that still exists. We marched down Kalakaua Avenue with people honking at us and saying, get a job and go back to Russia and all this stuff. I was pushing a stroller and Al had another baby on his shoulders. And we marched to Ala Moana Park to hear Patsy Mink talk. And the subject was nuclear testing in the Pacific.
Wow.
We met people there. We were very impressed, of course, with Patsy and with the idea that here's a bunch of people who are really interested in spending a Saturday discussing this problem. And we decided we wanted to know more about this group of people, and we started coming to church. I think it was the couples group that sort of cemented us.
There was, at one time, there was a young couples club in which you could belong if your combined ages did not exceed 65. We were eligible at that time.
Aw. And what happened in the club? Or is that a secret?
No, it was just a party. It was like a cocktail party. We met at somebody's house. We all left our children at home and we sat and talked. Sometimes we had somebody lead us with a discussion of something. I remember one time somebody set up a telescope in the backyard and we went out and watched a comet. I forget the name of the comet, but Halley's? Oh, okay. It was just fun. And we got to know people, we made friends, and that's the key, I think, to getting people connected with the church really is for them to find friends, kindred souls, but not necessarily people who always felt the same way as we did, just interesting people. Eventually, we both got involved in the congregation in more meaningful ways. And by that time, they had bought the building on Pali Highway. And since Al was an architect, he almost immediately got enrolled in the Building and Grounds Committee, I think, and he's been there ever since. This was in about 1964.
Al, what was the first thing you did to the building? The first work you did on the building. Do you remember?
I do not.
What was it like when they had bought the building in between when you had gone the first time to Makiki Mission and when you had come back? But how was it different? Like when you came in, what did it look like? How did Sunday look? Just take us through sort of a Sunday in the old arrangement there.
It really looked much like it does now.
Okay.
I mean, the congregation had made a lot of changes in the building since they bought it, but that's before we started. You know, the building started out as a residence and then it had a short life as a dormitory, during which time some pretty major changes were made, like adding fire escapes and that sort of thing. And then the church bought it in '62. And I was just looking, and you know, we have these history books, which I would refer to you if you're interested, anybody. We have lots of these. This is the more recent one. This is the original one. And it gives you a lot of history on the building and the congregation and the various ministers. You're right, Mary. The sanctuary was divided up with sliding doors, which are not there anymore. And we did do that. That was done after we came. And the whole orientation of the room was aimed toward the corner. We had a platform and a podium that fit right in the corner where Sophomores furniture is now. And the whole room and the sunroom were oriented toward that space. It just felt, of course, having met people through events and through our friends, we felt much more comfortable than we had the first time. And we liked the minister. The original minister had gone back to the mainland, and Gene Bridges had come by that time, and he was a great attraction for us and for a lot of people. He preached wonderful sermons. I used to feel like he did the reading and the thinking that I didn't have time to do because I had two little boys by that time. And then Gene would pull it all together. And for several years there, he was a minister that really drew people in.
Yeah.
Yeah. With Gene's reading, he opened doors for us on a Sunday morning, I thought.
Mm-hmm. So and then Gene got involved with the civil rights movement on the continent. Is that right? Like he actually went to Selma. Is that right?
He did. And that we were very proud of that the church would pay to send him to Selma. It was no small matter at that time. And that he was willing to go and literally risk his life for something that he really believed in. It was very good for the church when that happened. It gave us a lot of publicity and brought people in who wanted to see this guy and experience him.
Mm-hmm.
Even before he went to Selma, he was interested in the movement of, well, it wasn't Black Lives Matter, but it was the civil rights movement. And he brought a very young Black man as a guest speaker one Sunday, and that was Jesse Jackson.
Wow.
I can still remember what Jesse Jackson looked like standing in our sanctuary.
Wow.
So we were disappointed when things didn't go well with Gene after a while. And I think altogether he was our minister for about 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
And we've seen a lot of ministers since that time.
Yeah.
And we've had long periods of no minister when the congregation managed everything.
Yeah. What do you think? And I have no pride of any ownership in this, but do you think Gene's ministry, like for you, was really the time that you felt the most connected, like where you felt the most, I don't know, that you enjoyed the most? Would you say?
Enjoyed what?
Would you say that you enjoyed Gene's ministry the most so far since you've been at the church?
No, not the most, but it was different.
Yeah.
We were so impressed with his having done that, having gone to Selma, that after he came back, we were persuaded to sign the book and join the church. That was in 1965.
Okay. Yeah. Someone did have a question. I think it's more a curiosity. Do you remember when the congregation started singing Hawaii Aloha? Was that always there?
No.
Oh, okay. Was there a song?
Maybe 10 years.
Okay.
Probably during Jonnifer's, during Jonnifer's time.
Yes, it was.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
We used to sing Shalom Havarim at the end of every service. We did that for years.
And okay. Yeah.
And then Dona Nobis Pacem came along.
Okay. Good. So one of the things I know some people have questions about, I mean, right now, many people, many relationships of all kinds are, under a little bit of strain with the things going on around us. And as a couple that's gone through the civil rights era, that's gone through some other tumultuous times in our history, I guess one of the things I'm curious about is what you have found has helped you through times like these before.
There has been no time in the past like today.
Yeah. So then I guess maybe the question is, what's helping you get through right now, today?
Well, I think we learned early on in our marriage that we needed to give each other space, physical space and emotional space, and not expect the other one to agree with us all the time or to want to do what we wanted to do. And that certainly is appropriate now, I think, to give each other space because we can't go anywhere. Our children don't want us to go any farther than Long's and Safeway. And so we each kind of do our own thing throughout the day. We talk about the day, we talk about our dreams at night and stuff like that. But it's kind of just more of what we already had in terms of a relationship that endured.
Do people ever ask you, oh, sorry, hang on one second. Do people ever ask you what the secret is to a long happy marriage or a long marriage? Has anyone ever asked you that?
Not until you did.
Is there a secret, or did you just tell it to us? Is figuring out?
I just told you what I think it is, to respect each other.
Yeah.
And support one another when we need it.
Yeah.
I think that one element is that our values are similar. So there's not much chance for argument about right or wrong or political candidates, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we don't always support the same people. He actually sent money to Bernie Sanders 4 years ago.
Good for you, Al. And good for you, Molly. Both of you. Good. Well, I guess we didn't get it answered if there's just like a special super secret to doing
There's no, I don't think there's any magic word.
Okay. We're getting a lot of questions in the chat, so I'm gonna just kind of one just going back a little bit to kind of the history of the church, and I know it was a painful era in the church because I think the church is still feeling some of the effects of it through different ways. But one question was just to hear your take on the Vietnam era at the church and what was going on there with the church, with the minister, and with some other things like that. What were both of your impressions during that era at the church?
Well, there was some turmoil in the church. I think most of us were against the war, wanted to see it end. We had quite a lot of military members and their families as part of the congregation, and that kind of complicated things, especially when the sanctuary for draft resistors was established at the church. Many of us supported it, but we began to have misgivings. In fact, we even made food and took it for them to eat. And the church began to fill up with these young men. And eventually a bunch of girls who were kind of like camp followers. And then it became public that these were not just draft resistors. Some of them were AWOL soldiers who were actually deserters. And that made it impossible for our military members to come to church anymore. The feelings were so high, and some of them, I was told, got ordered not to come to that church anymore. And the church was under surveillance. And things began to happen that were very offensive to some of our older members, older than we are. And finally, we just had to say, we can't do this anymore. It's tearing up the church.
Do you remember what year that, just roughly what time that was? What years?
I don't remember, but if you want to look in this book, you'll find it.
Good. And for those of you who in the member area of the church, that book is there as a PDF. So it is available if people want to just go find it. So.
There aren't many copies of this. This is the first one. And I have 2 or 3. This is the one we did most recently.
Yeah.
And there are several copies of this that I think are in the study, aren't they?
Yes, they're there. Yeah, we did let one person from HPU was doing a project about local churches, and we did loan them a copy of each, but I think they returned them both. So, yeah. But yeah, we do try to guard the 25-year ones because there are less. Yeah.
It's as rare as the cookbook. We published a cookbook once too, and nobody can find copies of that anymore.
Aw, that would be great. There's a question here. Mary's recollecting that someone maybe drew a gun on Ogden at one point during the Vietnam era. Is that right? Or maybe after?
I didn't hear all that question.
Would you
Mary
repeat that?
Sure. Mary is asking whether someone drew a gun on Ogden at one point.
It's possible. It's possible. I never heard that story.
If I could just ask again, I'm sorry, I know some people weren't logged in. If you could message me privately with the questions and not the whole group. I'm trying to frame, there's many questions and I'm just trying to frame them all. And so that would be wonderful. Thank you. So one question also that I was kind of curious about is, I mean, I know Al, you were involved in building and grounds from the beginning. What other roles have you both had, or have you had virtually all the roles at the church through the time, or what other committees or groups have you both enjoyed serving on, or not enjoyed serving on?
Well, I was a member of the board at one time. That was maybe 35 years ago. I never advanced beyond that.
Well, I started out being part of the religious education. I was invited to become a teacher. And I did that for several years and enjoyed it. And so I was on the RE committee, and then I was on the board. I was the secretary and the vice president and the president for two different periods of time. I was on the membership committee for years until about 2 years ago. I think the only thing I've never, we call this, what we call the Social Justice Council now, we call the Public Affairs Council. And I was active in that because that's the sort of thing that brought us to the church in the first place, was social action. And I participated in a cooperative preschool that some women in the church formed. And I participated in that for a couple of years. until I had my third child, and then I dropped out for a while. But we were proud of that because it was an experiment in childcare and preschool. It was totally run and enacted by the members. It was called the Honolulu Cooperative Play School. My friend Marilyn was one of the members of that. She made up a report card that she gave every child at the end of the school year that said they all got A's in cooperating and in playing because we were the cooperative play school. But we were only provisionally legal as far as the state was concerned. They had fault to find with our building. And so the cooperative play school moved to another church, to the Lutheran church in Makiki. But it endured as a part of the preschool opportunities for parents for about 25 years. And I was proud that the church had started it. It was a bunch of women, none of whom any of you would remember the name. Marion Bridges, Jean's wife, was one of them. And we were determined that it not be just babysitting and playing, but that it be meaningful and that we learn from it how to be teachers of small children. And I had two at that time. I didn't really know much about child care or child development. So we had classes and we brought in speakers and we had meetings. And we gave it a good foundation that lasted for a long time.
That sounds beautiful. That sounds wonderful. Did you have a similar experience or ever with the sort of the growth or the vibrancy of the learning community or the religious education at the church? So not the school, but the religious education at the church. Can you tell us some about that history?
Well, I saw what a big difference it makes to have a professional religious education director, because our program didn't really thrive until we had somebody. And we've had some good ones, and Nan Kleiber's certainly been the best, I think. But we had a lot of kids. We had, at one point during Dick Allen's ministry, we had 250 members in the church, and we had over 100 children. We had 8 classes upstairs. We had to divide some of the rooms into 2 classes so we could have one for each grade level. And the teachers were all church volunteers, but we had professional guidance, and it made a big difference.
Did your children participate in that as well?
They did while they were children. When they got old enough to stay home on Sunday and play with their neighborhood friends, they would prefer to do that than come to church with us, except for our daughter. She continued to come through her high school years. She comes to church now on Christmas Eve and sometimes on Mother's Day. But the boys don't.
And for sometimes on the helping the work parties, right? I think have I seen your daughter at work party? No?
Yeah, she brings her truck and helps us with that sometimes.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's Jill and Mike are asking a question actually that I have, which is, how did 250 people fit in the sanctuary?
We had smaller chairs for one thing. And they were just crammed in. I mean, not everybody came every Sunday.
Yeah,
but that's how many we had on the book as active members.
Yeah, we have an inverse thing right now that many many of my colleagues would be jealous of, which is we sometimes have often, well, not as much lately, but for a while when we were meeting in person, we would have more people in worship than members. The vast majority of churches, you have more members than actually come on Sunday. Now in COVID, it's pretty balanced. We're getting about 84 to 85. And so now it's a little bit more like a regular church. But what Molly says about the number of members doesn't mean all those people are there on Sunday is what most churches are like. Our church for a while was the reverse, which was interesting. So one of the other questions that we had is someone was just kind of curious about Mabel Babcock and her legacy she's left the church. But can you tell us about Mabel, since so much of what she's done has helped so many and has helped the church so much? Not everyone knows who she was, and I think some people would love to know a little more.
Well, Mabel was a retired school teacher. She taught at Kamehameha schools, and she lived near us here in Manoa. She was part of the church from way back, long before we started coming, I think. But, you know, she was one of those people that just shows up every Sunday. She was very eloquent. If she had something to say during a dialogue at the church, it was worth listening to. She was a volunteer teacher at Foster Garden after she retired from teaching. And she had a beautiful backyard. She would bring things and make decorations for us frequently on Sundays. She had strong opinions, but she was a dedicated Unitarian. Back in those days, we took a couple months off every summer and just had no services, no activities at church at all. And Mabel took that time to attend a Buddhist church because she had strong inclinations, I think, toward being a Buddhist. She lived pretty modestly. When she died, she left us the contents of her house here in Manoa. And that was it. That's all we expected from Mabel. We had this, we filled up the gallery on a Saturday and had a special sale of her furniture and her artwork, and we made some money that way. And we thought that, you know, we thanked Mabel for that. And she had left the bulk of her estate, which was, I guess, primarily her house here in Manoa, to her brother, who was younger than she and whom she expected would survive her, but he didn't. He died about a year after she did. And the money came to the church because that's the way Mabel had set it up. If her brother didn't need it, the rest of her estate was to come to the church, and it did. So we had this astounding bequest that we didn't know what to do with.
Wow, I never knew that story. Thank you. Al?
One memory I have of being with Mabel was that because she was active at Foster Garden, she knew of a bow tree there, and there we had on our 2500 Poly Highway a bow tree, sort of town side of the Port Cocher, that through the years dropped fruit that was left there on the ground, and it rotted and became good mulch.
Mm.
And once potluck sale, bazaar sale, Mabel and I bagged this good mulch, and it was for sale for $1 a bag. And admonition was that anything that you fertilize with it is going to improve your mind. We called it Bodoo. I think all the bags sold.
There's another story about that tree and Mabel. We finally had to cut the tree down, and we were very sad about that. It was a big bow tree, but it had roots that were invasive, and they began pushing up the floor, not in the church, but in the neighbor's house. And Mabel agreed that what we had to do was to cut down the bow tree because there was no way to contain it. So we had a memorial service for the tree before it was cut down, which she conducted, and we all stood around in the porte cochere and around the tree and sang, and she said good words about the bow tree and the wisdom of, and the Buddha supposedly sat under that tree when he attained enlightenment. And it was such a unique story that it made the newspapers with a picture. And somewhere in the church, in one of those scrapbooks upstairs, there's a picture of us standing around the bow tree having a memorial service for it. And then we all went home and the tree was cut down.
So, yeah, thank you so much for sharing those. That's beautiful. There were some other person questions, if I may be so bold to ask. Also, someone asked if you remember Fred Harper, and the room that bore his name for many years and still does in some ways. So any stories about Fred?
In my mind, it's still the Fred Harper room.
Sure, yeah.
You want to tell who Fred was?
Well, Fred was an interior designer, and he had very good taste. In addition to selecting everything that was in what became the Fred Harper room, he did Sunday decorations. He had some friends over on the Windsor side that had a nursery, and so he was privy to all of that, and his decorations were so good that a member named Cecil Dotz would take a picture of them every Sunday. And I think those pictures are available in the attic storage archives if we ever want to expose them.
All right.
But he was very talented.
Yeah.
That room was made over and with all the furnishings that Fred chose and that the Dots paid for when the minister's study was moved upstairs. Originally, the minister's study was where it is now in the Fred Harper room. An interim minister that we had convinced us that was not the appropriate place for the minister should be. The minister should be upstairs in a more secluded private space. So we moved the minister's study upstairs and developed the Fred Harper room into what became sort of the congregation's living room. And now it's a minister's study again, and I hope you feel secluded and private enough to be comfortable there.
Maybe I just don't need as much seclusion. Maybe I was suffering in my seclusion upstairs. I like to see when people are coming into the church. So personally,
that's what some of your predecessors did. Dick Allen loved it.
Yeah. It used to be that you had to go through, from what I understand, you had to go through the minister's office to get to the church office. Not had to, but you could. And
you could if you moved, you could do that today if you moved a bookcase.
Yeah.
The
All in,
door's still there.
all in good time, Molly. All in good time. So someone had another question about another person. If you remember at all Barack Obama when he attended the church.
I wish I did, but I don't. And I must have been there at the time. I may have been in the RE program, but as I told you, we had a lot of kids in those times.
Yeah.
And I was always in kindergarten. I never got out of kindergarten. So I don't. I remember his grandmother vaguely because it was she who brought him to the church for Sunday school.
Okay. Great. So I think we've covered some of it. There's some other questions, but I think we've kind of covered them, and I might tell folks to kind of rewatch it. Because one of the things I want to get into a little bit is, I mean, I think what a lot of people are curious about is you've seen the church through generations, and what is it you think you'd like to see the church doing, say, in the next 5 years or the next generation? Do you think much about that, or what's your opinion?
I think the church should continue on its outreach programs. I think our church is unique in doing as much outreach as we do. So I think it's important to continue that.
And I think we need a bigger public face. We at one time we even hired somebody to do publicity for the church, and that was Jim Brewer, who died just recently. I think we would have a lot more people coming to church and wanting to stay with us if they knew we were there and knew what kinds of things we did and what their experience might be if they came. But we don't seem to have any public presence currently. I'd like to see more of, I'd like Al, I'd like to see us doing a little more in the areas of public affairs. And I'd like us to make it known, let people know what we're doing, be proud of it.
There was a time when we had an ad in the paper, probably on a Saturday edition. It was stopped because of the cost, as I recall.
So it was like an ad just saying, this is where the Unitarians are meeting, or this is where the UU church is. These are the things we believe, and you might like it here, like that kind of advertisement.
And it had the sermon title for the week. That it changed every week, so that people could come with some expectation of what they were going to hear. I thought we should continue to do it no matter what it cost, but it was expensive. Display ads, there's still religious display ads in the paper, but not very many of them. And they're usually much bigger churches than we are. I guess we just don't have room in our budget for it.
Yeah.
Did
the ad ever say, you may be a Unitarian, but not know it?
Yes. There were commercially designed ads that the UUA used to do, and I don't know if they still do it, that they would send to a church for a small fee that were ready to be printed in a newspaper. You didn't have to have a designer or an artist. You just had to get them to the newspaper. And we did that for a while. And that question is one that was often part of these ads. You may be a Unitarian, but don't know it. Come and find out.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen there's a whole sort of column or a whole group of those kinds of things that actually are still available. I mean, I think in the time I was here, there used to be a Sunday service section, and a few years ago, people did away with it. And now around Christmas and Easter, we get notes asking if we want to talk about the services that are available. There used to be a dedicated area that was available. I mean, now I know some churches still pay for their own kind of advertisement that's at the same rate as all other advertisers, you know, which, is kind of a lot. So, but yeah. So anything, I mean, that's, sort of I do think some of the outreach, we've been doing lately with even just the monthly pieces are starting to lead to even better relationships with folks. And I definitely agree with you that one of the strengths of Unitarian Universalism is our shared beliefs with community organizations that maybe different kinds of churches aren't as comfortable sharing. And so it's something that's healthy for the church and also sort of a unique experience that we can offer. So, thank you for that. And yeah, there's some other questions and comments here. Some were kind of curious a little bit about your own religious upbringing. I know you mentioned Congregationalist for Al and Presbyterian from Molly, but whether that experience growing up made you want to find a church, or if you had kind of the experience of your children of figuring out once you didn't have to go to church anymore, you didn't really want to go to church anymore. Do you think your early kind of training in faith or experience of faith made you want to come to church, or was church so different in Unitarian Universalism that it didn't feel like your previous experience?
I think it made me feel like the early experience was certainly not negative, and it was very much a part of my life all through high school. It just made me feel like this is what a family does, is belong to a church and go to it and support it. But I kind of lost faith in all the doctrine of the Presbyterians. It just wasn't for me anymore. I had tried a couple of churches just out of curiosity, but I had never found one where I felt particularly eager to go back.
My mother went to Congregational church fairly regularly. My father never went to church, and I was a reluctant Sunday school student. I was told that if I wanted to go to a movie that week, I would have to go to Sunday school. So that was an
smart.
incentive.
That's good. Some people are asking us some more in our history questions. Was there ever a period that there were, say, more college students coming to services? That's a tricky age to get people to get up on a Sunday morning. So I'm curious also if in other generations if we had more of them.
I'm not sure, but I know at one time we had a presence on the UH campus. And it might have been something that Mike Young set up, but I'm not certain of that. Where they could use a space on campus for what I think were discussion groups. And the idea was that these discussion groups would inspire people to come and try the church. I don't think it had much effect. I don't remember that it did.
Yeah. Okay. And do you remember how the relationship with Sophomores began, or when that was?
I don't.
I don't either, not with Sophomores, but in the very early days before the congregation was renting from the Hawaii Mission Academy, they were offered space by Temple Emmanuel, which was then located in a house in Manoa, and they offered free space to the Unitarians for their services.
Oh,
So out of that grew our what's always been a good relationship with Temple Emmanuel. And Sophomores, you know, is kind of, I don't know what their relationship is with Temple Emmanuel. It's a friendly one, I think. And they came to us, and they came to us many, many years ago and wanted to rent space on a Saturday, and they've done it for years.
Was the Metropolitan Community Church before Sophomores?
No, it was at the same time, because they met, the MCC met on Sunday night, and Sophomores met on Saturday.
yeah. And we're gonna kind of draw to a close in a little bit, but there is one more question for Al. Someone was asking whether there used to be a men's group that met at the church, and whether you were involved in that.
There was a men's group that Julian Shokier was instrumental in developing, and we would have a weekly meeting in the Fred Harper room, and there would be 8 to 10 participants. And before I joined, Julian had come up with a list of possible discussion subjects. After that list had been gone through, the men's group would tell how they were. They would check in, so to speak. But there would be no topic to discuss, and so it lost its value, I thought.
Okay. So we've covered a lot more ground than I said we would cover when we spoke earlier today. So I want to thank you both first for your flexibility and your candor and your generosity of spirit. And what I also wanted to just ask, like, I love talking with you and hearing from you. And I know you guys have some time around the house. And earlier, I know you said, if people have specific questions, how would you feel about people reaching out to you with questions either about the church or about life or other things like that?
I'd love it.
Yeah. I'm not going to just, email everybody your phone number, but I assume it's okay if someone has a question and they want to get in touch with you, they can give you a call, right?
Certainly.
Good. Yeah, well, Al, did you have something?
I thought you might ask what we looked like 62 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there was a request to see a wedding picture.
Oh.
Oh, how beautiful.
Oh, sweet.
Oh, beautiful.
Oh, he's got a flat top.
Whoa, you're a pretty cool dude there, Al.
I still
That's
have my
great.
dress, but I can't wear it anymore.
Oh, thank you for that.
I think Molly looks a lot like Allison.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
Molly looks a lot like Allison, I think, in the picture.
No, I thought she looked like me.
Yeah, exactly. You are right.
You're right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Al and Molly, for your time, and we love you so much. And thanks so much for all the wonderful questions. And this was really a treat. And we should all do it again real soon. So I'm gonna just kind of close and just say, blessings to everyone. Thank you for this time, and we will see you again very soon next week.